Thank you, Jorge, and thank you for everybody for being here. I'm going to use the last squadron that I commanded when I was in the Navy as a bit of a backdrop for a test case to talk about the power of leveraging culture to drive performance and achieve transformation in an organization. So let's start out with a tale of two cultures. The first, imagine a squadron, about 1,300 folks strong, 117 airplanes. And they're operating, but they're experiencing, on average, over the period of the last year and a half, four and a half significant safety incidents per month. They've got $8.5 billion worth of airplanes to fly, but only one of them is actually safe to fly. The airplanes have racked up 10.5 safety-critical discrepancies apiece. And a safety-critical discrepancy in the aviation field is one in which we would say that airplane should not go flying. And from that, you might assume that there was only one airplane that squadron was flying, but actually there were dozens. And the reality was that squadron was flying those airplanes, some of them with 20, 30, 40 reasons why they should be grounded, and yet they were putting young aircrew going out to an aircraft carrier to land for the first time in their life at night, pitching deck, tough weather conditions, and they've got airplanes that should not be flown. And that was the attitude in which they were operating. But it wasn't just the operations. Significant personnel incidents going on a regular basis, major disciplinary issues, EEO issues, harassment issues at a tune of about 3 per month over the past year. The 38-week training syllabus the squadron was tasked to deliver was over 16 months behind schedule. Divestiture of legacy assets off track, maintenance programs failing audits, budget blown. That's the circumstance in this squadron. Now imagine this other squadron, where they're experiencing next to zero incidents. Trend is downward, aircraft are up, they're flyable, they're getting best of breed inspection results, they're being recognized for their ability to manage and implement their personnel management systems, they're divesting the legacy assets, budget coming in under budget versus even though they're operating at a higher tempo than expected. The exact same squadron we're talking about, and separated only by 18 months in time. And what I would submit was a focus on leadership and a healthy culture in the organization. And that's what we're going to talk about here today, is that culture and how we transform that culture in a very, very short period of time to achieve some very remarkable results. So let's start with this and understand that a fundamental view that culture acts as a very, very final last layer of defense. And it is often very underappreciated by most organizations. We all invest in our companies to get the right capabilities at the right place at the right time. And that's how we go to market in many places and serve our customers. And then we develop the necessary procedures so that folks can use those capabilities to get those value adds out to our customer set, right? But in the end, if each one of those elements between capabilities and procedures serves as a barrier to failure, your final barrier is culture. And a lot of times this gets represented as the Swiss cheese model, right? Where the holes line up and then you have a failure point. But I would submit, if it were really Swiss cheese and you could see the holes, well, you'd fill them in, right? That's what we do as managers and leaders in our organizations. But we use culture as a backstop, as a fundamental aspect of counting on our people to do the right thing at the right time, whether or not they're being asked to do it or not, to know it's right. And that's the importance of culture, and that's where you want to get to in your organization. So just what is a culture? What is that organizational culture? I don't believe it's about free coffee in the break room, or about bean bags, next to your desk, or bringing your dog to work. It's about fundamentally the way you work. There's a lot of research out there that supports that, right? So Edgar Schein talks about it's really those basic values and underlying assumptions that the organization goes forward with. It's also, in terms of Tony Watson, where he talks about it's the appropriate ways that the members of the organization believe that they're going to do their work. And ultimately, that's how your culture manifests. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to describe, but the way your culture manifests is in how people work at your organization. So look at some surveys that we've done at Wilson Caramel Company amongst executives. Nearly every executive we survey will say that managing culture is a priority. But only about a third say that they've actually gone through the process of defining their culture, measuring progress, and working to continuously improve it. Only about a half go beyond just basic surveys to understand their culture and why it is the way it is. Less than half can include culture alignment with the organization's culture expectations in their performance evaluation. And only about a half actually go to try to make an effort to evaluate cultural fit when they're doing interviewing. So all of that is, I think, really a good indicator that it says that, most folks understand the importance of culture to an organization, but they don't know how to go about implementing a healthy, robust culture and driving it to be where they want it to be. So here's a brief little model that I think drives the way a lot of folks operate in their lives. You have beliefs that ultimately drive your behaviors, and just like we were all told as kids by our parents, your behaviors are going to result in certain consequences. And that translates into the work that we do. The problem is when you talk about changing your culture, you can't just tell people to believe something new. Because once they get older than about 7 years old, they stop just believing what they're told because they're told, right? So they base it on evidence and fact. And so you've got to demonstrate to them why the values that you're talking about are important. We also can't compel people to behave in a certain way. So that really leaves us back with consequences. We can affect consequences, both positive and negative, and that's your most powerful lever when we're talking about affecting culture. So we have a process, and a process that I've subscribed to through a long time, going through numerous organizational transformations to address definitive culture change. So you must learn the culture in the organization. You've got to establish. You have to learn the existing culture. You have to establish the culture you want. You've got to align the organization around it. And then you've got to really develop, nurture, and make it sustainable. When I hear managers say, talking about their employees, well, when the cat's away, the mice is going to play, that's a great indicator to me that the culture is not robust, whatever it is. I believe you want to get your culture to the point where people do what they're supposed to do, whether or not their boss is there watching, right? That's where we want to be able to rely on our folks. So let's take this back to this squadron that I led, and I led this transformation in. I needed to learn the existing culture, so I spent about 6 weeks interviewing every single individual in this 1,300-person organization to get their understanding of why the organization worked the way it did. And then I compared it to what I believe represented the characteristics of a high-performing, high-reliability organization. And these are established in solid research from a lot of different bodies. And ultimately, I think it represents a great framework for how to design your culture. Characteristics like a level of knowledge, formality, having a questioning attitude, deliberately backing your team members up, and operating with integrity. If those aspects are part of your culture, it's going to be robust if they're being lived out every single day in the way people are doing their work. Now, the next step is to take those key concepts and to turn them into very, very meaningful words and beliefs for your particular organization. And the way I did that with my squadron was, I said, that's where I want to go with those 5 characteristics. But given our circumstances and where we're at right now and where our failure points are at, here are the key elements that I need to set in the organization. And I said, I'm going to have 4 expectations for every member of this organization. As the commanding officer, and I call them the commanding officer's 4 expectations. They were professionalism, responsibility, treating each other with respect, and taking care of each other. And so we started to define exactly what they meant. And we talked about it in every meeting. I opened every meeting that I attended for a year and a half with this question to the folks that were there. What are my 4 expectations? And we wouldn't move off of that point until somebody could tell me what they were and then describe to me what each one of those words meant. And then we started translating that down into other meetings and operational turnover meetings and event briefings. And we started tying each one of those expectations into every aspect of what we were doing. And then I developed this coin. And this is a coin that I could give out to somebody if they'd done something that I considered exceptional. And emblazoned on those 4 expectations. And so when I saw somebody who'd done something that that I wanted to recognize, whether it was correcting a squadron mate for not wearing their protective equipment, was it this questioning the evolution that was going on? Was it the right thing that we should be doing, or were we about to make a mistake? Whether it was congratulating or recognizing somebody else for overtly executing these cultural procedures, if I saw that, I would give them one of these coins, and I'd shake their hands, and then I'd ask them, why am I giving you this coin? And oftentimes, early in the process, what I would hear back is, well, because I did a great job, sir, because, you liked what I did. I said, no, why did I give you this coin? And folks started getting it. They started looking at the coin, and they'd say, because I demonstrated responsibility, and I was taking care of my squadron mate when he wasn't wearing his safety goggles, and I reminded him to put them on. That's exactly right. And we started mutually reinforcing these cultural behaviors, these expectations in terms of the actual behaviors that we were going to work with every single day and in every single evolution. And then we took it one step further. Organizations are going to make mistakes. People are going to make mistakes. And there was never an expectation that anybody would be perfect, right? But as we went back and we root caused those mistakes, we didn't just stop with who made the mistake and why did that person make a mistake. We then tied it back to which of these 4 commanding officer expectations did we not meet in this case. And people started thinking about it day in, day out, every aspect of their job. And that's how we started to align the organization around. And then we went and we translated our management processes and our reward process, our reward and our recognition programs to be aligned with those cultural expectations. And then the culture started to take hold, and lo and behold, people started making the decisions that I wanted them to make, whether I was in the room or not. People started making value-based judgment, not on their own values, but on the organizational values, and it became very, very powerful. So, with just a couple of minutes left in that backdrop of that cultural transformation that I was able to lead that squadron through, I'll leave you with some thoughts. If you're going to go down the process of transforming your organization, you have to understand it, I believe, where it is before you can understand how you're going to get to where you're going to go. You've got to define those cultural characteristics in terms that are really meaningful to your organizations. I go into a lot of organizations now where they've done research on HROs and high-performing cultures, and they will come back to me with things like this preoccupation with failure, or team backup, or focus on learning. And they'll say, we want to define our culture in terms of those things. And those are great. But if those words aren't going to mean something very, very specific to the members of their organization, then they're probably going to fall flat. And so we'll spend time talking with the executive team and the leadership team to really understand how the people in the organization think. So when we come up with those words, those key pillars, those key characteristics, they resonate across and up and down through the organization. I advise leaders to start the point for the transformation, to pick that starting point very, very carefully. We've all been probably in organizations that said they're going to change, and nothing really happened. Or maybe they started to change, and then they got scared, or they stepped back and they figured out it wasn't going the way that they had imagined, right? And so I think there's really only one thing harder than doing a whole-scale organizational cultural transformation, and that is starting one, stopping it, and then trying to go off in another direction with the next one. All right, so choose that starting point very, very carefully. I cannot emphasize the need to over-communicate. And I would say communicate to the point that you think that you could not possibly communicate the expectations from a cultural perspective anymore, and then do it all again at least twice as much. It's that level of emphasis that needs to be told. And so when I go back to some of those early manager meetings with my key managers, and I would say, all right, folks, who can tell me what my 4 commanding officer expectations are? You would kind of look at the table and say, well, sir, you know what they are. Like, I know what they are. I want to know that you know what they are. And I want to know that you can explain them as well as I can, because you're going to have to explain them, and your supervisors and your team leads and even your own employees and the peer-to-peer correction going, they're going to have to be able to explain them as well as I can, if this is going to become the reality of the culture that we're trying to build here. As a leader, everybody is going to look to you to have all the answers and know how we're going to navigate this path from start to finish, right? And I was very, very transparent that I know where we are, I know where we want to go. I can see about this far in front of us. And when we get a little bit further down the road, I'll be able to see a little bit further with a little bit more clarity. And what I'll probably guarantee you right now is we'll shift paths a little bit. We'll change directions from here to there. But what I feel very confident is we take an incremental, iterative approach, is we won't take a step forward and then have to go back down the same road that we were on. We won't go back in the same direction. But don't let the organization pressure you into thinking that you have to have all of those answers at the very beginning of the journey. Celebrating wins and even losses, as long as you tie it back to what those key behavior expectations are, is absolutely critical. Don't wait for giant wins to pull everybody together and hold a town hall and say, look at what we did, look at what we accomplished, we finally met this goal. Do it on a day-to-day basis. If you can find multiple reasons every single day to encourage and affirm individual behaviors, you will emphasize that culture so much more quickly than if you only took opportunities at a quarterly or every 6 months or every annual update where you finally get everybody together in one forum all together. And then lastly, you really have to understand who is responsible for the culture of an organization. And I believe it's everybody, right? It's not just the boss's point to manage. It's just not the OE leader or the process safety leader or whoever's responsibility in their job title it falls on. It is every member of that organization's responsibility for making the culture become what the expectation is. I love going into a workshop forum where people will tell me, you know, the organization in this culture, or the culture in this organization is so toxic. It is so frustrating to be here. Somebody needs to change this. And I'll ask them, so which of the somebodies in this room are going to be the somebody to start making that change, right? Because everybody might want that change, but very few people are willing to make the effort to actually execute the change. And so we've got to get that to be part of the culture too. It's an ownership mindset across the entire organization. So with that, I think I'm down to my last 30 seconds. I'm getting the thumbs up. And I will leave that. If there's a quick question, I'll answer it now. Otherwise, we'll save it for the panel discussion that's coming up later this afternoon.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. So it came from, so the question was, those 4 commanding officer expectations, how did I land on them and decide that they were right for that particular squadron? It came through the process of understanding where we were and getting those one-on-one and small group interviews where I asked folks, one, where we were, where did they want to go? But then I had to come back and say, okay, what are the fundamental key characteristics? Got to have buy-in, but we've also got to be going in the right direction. Thank you for the question. Thank you all for your time today.